So I'd invite Peter Lavoie and General Kidwai to the stage. Morning. Which one? You can take the seat here, please. So, since 1998, when both India and Pakistan tested nuclear explosive devices, there has been one central figure whose vision and leadership has shaped Pakistan's nuclear program. That person is General Khalid Kidwai, who established and then served as Director General of Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division from its inception until last year, an incredible span of 15 years. It is rare that we in the non-governmental community have opportunities to interact with and hear from officials like General Kidwai. Indeed, I would note that we invited the General to speak twice at the conference before. We were very glad that he has accepted on the third try. And he is here with us today to discuss how he sees the nuclear landscape from Pakistan. Joining General Kidwai to moderate the conversation is Dr. Peter Lavoie. Peter is known to many of you, having engaged in both academic and policy work over the course of his career. In recent years, he has served in a series of senior positions in the U.S. government, working on South Asia, at the National Intelligence Council, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and then at the Pentagon, and rumor has it that he will soon be rejoining government. There are people who understand there are few people who understand the contemporary security challenges in South Asia, as well as Peter. As with General Kidwai, we are very fortunate to have Peter here with us today. With that brief introduction, I would invite General Kidwai to take the podium for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Tony. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure indeed to be here for the prestigious annual conference of the CEIP. As someone on whom successive Pakistani governments bestowed the unique responsibility and privilege of guiding Pakistan's nuclear program for the last 15 years, I look forward to interaction with this elite international galaxy through the medium of a conversation. But before we do that, I would like to share a few thoughts which might help in focusing the conversation. This, however, is not meant to restrict the conversation in any way. Far from it, I would be very happy indeed to attempt answers to any questions. Today, when I scan the global environments as they have evolved over the last decade plus, I find that the early expectations and hopes generated by the end of the Cold War that the world might become a more harmonious and peaceful place have all but evaporated. Instead, what one finds today is a conflict-ridden world, a revival of the Cold War, with newer poles emerging from the earlier bipolar to unipolar to now a multipolar world. In this multipolar world, alignments have undergone change in Europe and Asia particularly, and new equations have emerged as nations reassess their interests and readjust. While nations readjust, the global trend is on retaining focus on management of conflicts, national and regional security, and economic progress. Added to the security calculus is the universal nature of terrorism, threatening to overshadow all else. The world is attempting to grapple with the phenomena in cooperative ways. South Asia, too, has absorbed many of the emerging global political trends of alignments and realignments. What is unfortunate, though, is that while South Asia attempts to remain in step with the changing global trends politically and integrate economically, and despite being aware of the fact that the region needs extraordinary efforts to develop economically and politically in order to fight the massive threats of poverty, weak health, education, and other social indicators and terrorism, it remains oblivious to what I would like to call the obvious. The obvious is not sinking in our regional calculations. And what is this obvious? The obvious is the elephant in the room, i.e., the prerequisite of creating an enabling environment for peace and strategic stability in order to focus on sustained socio-economic development of the region. The obvious is that the enabling environment for peace and strategic stability will only come through mature conflict management leading to conflict resolution. This obvious has been brushed under the carpet for decades in a forlorn hope that somehow it might go away. How can sustained socio-economic progress come about if the threat of outstanding conflict, tension, and recrimination hangs permanently in the air in eyeball-to-eyeball stance with nuclear weapons in the background? Unfortunately, those who say that conflict resolution alone will lead to true peace and stability leading to economic development are dismissed as revisionists, as if seeking resolution to conflict was unnatural and nations should learn to live with conflicts and status quo. In this unstable regional environment, one nuclear power trying to teach lessons to another nuclear power through the medium of small arms and mortar shells on the Kashmir line of control and bluster, I leave it to your judgment. In South Asia, sadly, we remain prisoners to the past, frozen in time, unable to break the shackles of history. Then we expect naively that by some miracle, we shall become part of the global economic trends and benefit from these. Ladies and gentlemen, if we recognize that to develop socio-economically, extended periods of peace and stability are fundamental, my submission is that these will not come through miracles, bluster, and zero-sum games. The region and its leadership will have to rise to the highest levels of statesmanship, recognize what I call the obvious, stare this reality in the face, and courageously work towards the attainment of peace and stability through the only sure-footed method known to history, that is conflict management leading to conflict resolution. There is no running away from this stark reality, conflict management leading to conflict resolution. It is not revisionism, it is common sense, it is common interest, it is self-interest. If South Asia and its leadership does not want to or is unable to recognize this reality, well, I'm afraid that we could carry on as we have done for the past 68 years, for the next 68 years, and bluster and blunder our way through future generations, condemning our 1.5 billion people in perpetuity to hunger, filth, and squalor. Having said this, however, I would like to remain optimistic, and therefore, I draw your attention to an opportunity, fleeting perhaps in terms of time, for a way forward towards the attainment of the objective of permanent peace and strategic stability in South Asia. This opportunity, in my judgment, exists today. It has emerged paradoxically because of two independent developments or realities which need to be recognized for their linkage and grasped by the democratically elected leaderships of India and Pakistan, if only there is what President Clinton had called the vision thing. Let me flag these first, and then I'll dwell on these. The two realities of today's South Asian strategic situation are, one, notwithstanding the growing conventional asymmetries, the development and possession of sufficient numbers and varieties of nuclear weapons by both India and Pakistan has made war as an instrument of policy near redundant. The tried and tested concept of MAD has ensured that. Two, the historic coincidence of the near simultaneous emergence of two strong democratically elected governments in India and Pakistan, with the advantages of comfortable majorities and the factor of reasonable time at their disposal to address the long-standing issues with a sense and understanding of history. This has never happened before. These then are the two self-evident realities or givens of the South Asian situation today. When we look at the linkages of the two realities, the vision thing would make it seem that this just might be the historic opportunity of a lifetime, waiting for the two leaderships to grasp, sit together, explore the possibilities of conflict resolution, and in a supreme statesmanlike act, go for it in a manner that all parties to the conflict end up on the winning side. No zero-sum games, no one-upmanship. History and circumstance beckon. Whether history can be grasped remains to be seen, and opportunity exists. Needs vision, statesmanship, and guts. Vision of Nixon and Zhou Enlai, and perhaps of Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a time in the aftermath of the nuclear tests of 1998 when some people unwisely experimented with the idea that despite the nuclear overhang in South Asia, there was space for limited conventional war, and therefore, one nuclear power might be able to overwhelm another nuclear power. It could be attributed to an inability to grasp the changed strategic environments of a nuclearized South Asia, a learning curve perhaps. Besides being dangerous thinking, it was also naive, as the experience of the last 17 years has shown. The idea didn't work in the escalation of 2001, 2002, not during the tensions of 2008, nor is it likely to work in the future. The naivety of finding space for limited conventional war, despite the proven nuclear capabilities of both sides, went so far as to translate the thinking into an offensive doctrine, the cold start doctrine, equivalent to a pre-programmed, predetermined shooting from the hip posture in quick time, commencing at the tactical level, graduating rapidly to the operational strategic level, strangely oblivious of the nuclear Armageddon it could unleash in the process. It was clearly not thought through. Of course, Pakistan took the doctrine seriously because it had a direct bearing on our security, as well as to prevent destabilization in an environment of conventional asymmetry. We were the affected party. The doctrine was meant to be unleashed against us. We could not ignore the effects being generated by the offensive doctrine. Therefore, in order to deter the unfolding of operations under the new doctrine, Pakistan opted to develop a variety of short-range, low-yield nuclear weapons, also dubbed tactical nuclear weapons. This was a Pakistani defensive deterrence response to an offensive doctrine. But in an attempt to do one better on the escalatory rung, some people responded by a massive retaliation bluster without thinking through the consequences in a nuclear parity situation. We think it's time to get real. For 15 years, I and my colleagues at the Strategic Plans Division in Pakistan have worked for deterrence to be strengthened in South Asia comprehensively, so as to prevent war, to deter aggression, and thereby for peace, howsoever uneasy to prevail. We have worked to create roadblocks in the path of those who thought that there was space for conventional war despite nuclear weapons of Pakistan. I strongly believe that by introducing the variety of tactical nuclear weapons in Pakistan's inventory and in the strategic stability debate, we have blocked the avenues for serious military operations by the other side. That the debate has been hijacked towards the lesser issues of command and control and the possibility of their falling into wrong hands is unfortunate because it has distracted and diverted attention from the real purpose of the TNWs, that of reinforcing deterrence, preventing war in South Asia, ensuring peace, thereby creating an enabling environment for politics and politicians to reassert, lead the way towards conflict resolution, and give South Asia and its people a chance, a piece of the brave that they deserve. I suggest the debate be refocused to the objectives. And now, therefore, when we juxtapose the situation of a near military stalemate, if I may, with the political results thrown up by the elections of 2013 in Pakistan and of 2014 in India, where two political parties with strong electoral mandates have emerged, one sees the opportunity for statesmanship and vision to trump petty, short-sighted objectives. No weak coalitions, strong nationalistic credentials, and credibility on both sides. And to top it, availability of time to work things out in the remaining respective terms before the respective next elections. Will the vision thing prevail? The initiative does not lie with Pakistan. There are people who need to climb down from a high horse and get real. Well-meaning nudges from well-meaning friends would be most helpful in the larger interest of international peace and stability in a region dubbed as a nuclear flashpoint. A hands-off approach will be neither here nor there, and of course, the fleeting opportunity of history would have slipped. And my submission to friends who want to be helpful, please note the inadvisability of aggravating the existing delicate strategic balance in our troubled South Asia by one-sided and discriminatory overtures. Even-handed and non-discriminatory approach to South Asia alone will contribute towards peace and stability. Discriminatory approach on issues like NSG exemption and energy membership is already proving to be counterproductive. It will never be acceptable to Pakistan and will in no way contribute towards peace and stability. Let us desist from taking short-sighted measures today that would be regretted later. I would like to conclude by holding out an assurance to this audience on something I know worries the international community all the time: the safety and security of Pakistan's nuclear weapons in the disturbed security environment of our region. For the last 15 years, Pakistan has taken its nuclear security obligations seriously. We understand the consequences of complacency. There is no complacency. We have invested heavily in terms of money, manpower, equipment, weapons, training, preparedness, and smart site security solutions. I say with full responsibility that nuclear security in Pakistan is a non-issue. You have all your national technical means to verify, but you might also take my solemn word for it. Pakistan's nuclear weapons are safe, secure, and under complete institutional and professional control. I thank you.
Well, General Kidwai, thank you for those opening remarks. I'm sure that will stimulate a lot of questions and excitement in the audience. But before we turn this over to the audience for questions, I have the distinct honor to have a conversation with you and ask you a few questions myself. Now, of course, we've had these conversations going back many, many years, but generally in a slightly more discreet setting than this. So this is going to be new for us. But I want to start by just making a comment that when you look at the history of your country's nuclear weapons program, which really probably dates back to the very early 1970s, the initial idea and the desire to have nuclear weapons as a deterrent. Many people are associated with this program. You have Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, maybe initially General Zia, many other figures, but probably the shape and character of the nuclear weapons program today probably has more to do with your decisions and your work with the people that you work for as well than any other individual. And as you look back at your decade plus of experience in guiding the development and modernization of your country's nuclear weapons program, I'd like to ask you personally if you have, what is your greatest sense of accomplishment? What is your greatest achievement in your own mind? And as you reflect back on this long period, is there any single regret that still keeps you up at night?
No regrets, first of all. I think I'm a very satisfied soldier. It was a responsibility given to me post-May 1998. Under circumstances which were absolutely new to me. I had no idea whatsoever as to what the nuclear program of Pakistan looked like. I was very much a straightforward mainstream soldier. But then came May 98 and the series and a set of circumstances through which I landed in the spot of being the first DG-SPD. I think the greatest achievement, if I was to recollect in a sense, it's more comprehensive. It's not one particular item or one particular area that I can really put my finger on. It's a comprehensive satisfaction of having taken the Pakistani capability, which had been proven by the scientists at a scientific level, by exploding the devices in May 98 in response to India's tests, and having taken those devices which were scientific experiments, into an area of complete operationalization, into a vision which has consolidated Pakistan's nuclear capability in a manner that it today possesses a variety of nuclear weapons in different categories at the strategic level, at the operational level, at the tactical level, and the total comprehensiveness of the program is the effects that it is generating of deterrence and keeping war away. So, in a sense, if I was to put it in one sentence, that the development of the entire capability has ensured peace in South Asia. And I am fond of calling these weapons as weapons of peace because they have deterred the urge of aggression. And like I said in my opening remarks, it has closed the door to war being used as an instrument of policy. And therefore, if war as an instrument of policy is out, then there is an opportunity for strong politicians to weigh in. So the total sum of an achievement of 15 years perhaps is the complete development, we're almost 95% there in terms of the goals that we set out to achieve. And those goals have been achieved, and that is where I would say there's a sense of satisfaction.
That's very interesting, and I think no one would doubt that Pakistan has made tremendous progress in operationalizing what was initially a scientific capability, as you said early on. Now, you were, as you mentioned, you were part of the conventional military in the artillery, if I'm not mistaken. You had to take an idea of a nuclear deterrent and then integrate that into a system among all of your colleagues who are conventional warfighters. And now you say that war is no longer an option. How do your colleagues in the Pakistan military and the Navy and the Air Force, how do they relate to that? Do they still think about fighting and winning wars, despite what you and your colleagues have done at SPD to create a robust nuclear deterrent?
Look, SPD is not an island. SPD is very much part of the larger military of Pakistan. And when I say that war as an option is perhaps foreclosed, I think I reflect the opinion of the military in Pakistan, specifically Army, Air Force, Navy, and the SPD. So these four branches of the military in Pakistan together, I think it's a considered view that because of the nuclear capability one and the operationalization of the nuclear capability and the availability and the raising and the training of the strategic forces that are the end users of this capability, so to say, I think all four branches of the military, and I would go a step further, the entire authority of the National Command Authority, headed by the Prime Minister and the federal ministers and so on and so forth. I think there is a general understanding that the strategic capability of Pakistan has foreclosed these options. But having said that, war fighting, military is trained to fight wars. They can't just sit back and relax and say that, okay, war is no longer an option, so off we go. So there has to be a complete professionally trained conventional force in addition to the strategic force.
I think you've pointed to a tension that exists with every nuclear weapon state. Every nuclear weapon state has conventional military forces, the objective of which is to fight and win wars, to deter wars if possible, but to fight and win if necessary. And yet you have nuclear weapons probably designed to deter war at a higher level of violence. I know I've worked in the Department of Defense for nearly 2 decades, and I think we've struggled with that tension to see nuclear weapons, whether they're an extension of warfighting doctrines and plans and capabilities, or are they something different? How would you regard nuclear weapons? Are they an extension of the conventional forces of your country, or are they something that stands apart? And how is that appreciated by your other former colleagues in the Pakistan?
No, I don't think they are seen as separate weapons. They're not seen as separate weapons. They reinforce the deterrence. There's a deterrence value within the conventional forces, The combine of the Army, Air Force, Navy has a certain deterrence value, notwithstanding the conventional asymmetries that we keep talking about. There's a healthy balance between the conventional forces on either side. The nuclear forces are very much integrated as a backup force in some kind of situations, which we would like to call the larger nuclear strategy. Because in terms of our planning, we talk of course, the national strategies, then we talk of the nuclear strategy and the military strategy, the operational strategy at the 3 or 4 tiers. Nuclear strategy integrates the planned operations of the conventional forces and of the at a point in time when the nuclear forces might also come into play. So it is one integrated whole.
Okay. I've had the opportunity, as many people, some people in this audience have had, of visiting you in your office that you formerly inhabited in Rawalpindi at Chaklala. And I recall my first visit, there were a few photographs on the wall of some of the missiles that your country had tested. I think my last visit, all of the walls were full, and maybe that was the signal to you.
Two walls are full, 2 are still.
Oh, still have some space. Interesting. Maybe we can come back to that point. But two walls were very full, and if I recall, the last photograph I saw was of the Nasser, which is a short-range system. Can you describe the logic of having such a short-range system that I don't think any other country in the world possesses today, a missile or a capability to launch nuclear weapons at such a short range? And what is the logic behind this short-range system, as I think as you've described, as part of the full or multi or full spectrum deterrent capability?
No, but why do you say that no country demonstrates the short-range weapons? I think the US certainly does, and there are some other countries also who have short-range weapons. So Pakistan is not unique in developing the Nasser. But Nasser specifically was born out of a compulsion of this thing that I mentioned about some people on the other side toying with the idea of finding space for conventional war despite Pakistan's nuclear weapons. In my judgment, and by extension by the judgment of the National Command Authority, I think we figured out that what was driving this particular concept on the other side was that they were looking at certain gaps on the nuclear weapon inventory of Pakistan. What they were seeing as the adversary on the other side, they were seeing Pakistan's strategic weapons, meaning the ballistic missiles. They were perhaps looking at the operational level in terms of ranges, the lesser ballistic missiles. What they were finding attractive and what was probably encouraging them to find the space for conventional war below this gap was the absence of a complete spectrum of deterrence, if I may, that what we have been calling the full spectrum deterrence, that there was some kind of a gap in their visualization at the tactical level, and therefore it was leading to this encouragement or this idea or the concept on the other side that there was space for conventional war, because there was also talk of calling there was this term being used calling Pakistan nuclear bluff, as if they could go in with conventional war, conventional forces against Pakistan in a sort of limited time and space metrics, and Pakistan will not pick up the courage in that kind of a scenario to use its strategic weapons or the operational level nuclear weapons. So it was this particular gap that we felt needed to be plugged at the lowest rung, because war was being brought down under the cold start doctrine to the tactical level. If you know the cold start doctrine, as I'm sure this very educated audience would know what cold start doctrine, the essential or the elements are, war is being brought down to a tactical level, starting war, like I said, with a pre-programmed, predetermined shooting from the hip posture within 48 to 96 hours with independent integrated battle groups of about an armored brigade size. Now that is tactical level. And when you're trying to hit Pakistan within 48 to 96 hours with tactical formations, 8 to 9 of them simultaneously, you are obviously looking at gaps on our side on the tactical nuclear weapons. Therefore, the idea of Nasser was born. that we need to plug this particular gap which is encouraging or driving this particular doctrine. And so Nasser was created, and by the grace of God, it has been a great success, as all the tests have confirmed. And we hope, therefore, that the complete spectrum that we say, the full spectrum, strategic, operational, tactical, all three levels of nuclear weapons have been covered, and therefore we have now deterred, in our thinking, the tactical level operations under the Cold Start doctrine as well. And when that happens, then, as I say repeatedly, that we have ensured that peace will prevail.
Thank you for that complete description. I'm sure that was very educational to the audience. And you did indicate that, of course, the United States and other countries have had short-range or tactical systems in our arsenal. In fact, the U.S. innovated many many other systems, but we moved away from them ultimately because of concerns about the intermingling of conventional forces and nuclear weapons in a battlefield theater, which was very difficult. And I don't think the U.S. ever sorted this out from a doctrinal point of view, certainly not from how you would think about the actual operations would be conducted. And one of the concerns that I think the people that have been involved in the U.S. tactical nuclear weapons program, going back decades, one of the concerns they've had is that this actually makes nuclear war more likely rather than less likely, having these capabilities, because these capabilities are not traditionally associated with the doctrine or the condition you identified earlier, mutually assured destruction. Is there a risk? Do you have some concern that the introduction of short-range tactical systems actually makes nuclear war more likely?
I think it makes it less likely. It's how you look at it. Because, but to the point of repetition, I would say that if tactical nuclear weapons of Pakistan makes India think twice, if not 10 times, about unleashing this doctrine within 48 to 96 hours, predetermined, pre-programmed kind of a doctrine, I think it ensures that thinking twice, thinking 10 times, the war will be deterred. However, if war is not deterred, then obviously some kind of a mad doctrine either will come into play. Because right now what is being said, like I said, bluster and blunder, and we're talking about bluster from the other side, that a tactical nuclear weapon will call for a massive retaliation kind of a response, which I think it's a very unrealistic. It has not been thought through. What it's not looking at is the Armageddon kind of a situation that this kind of a threat is creating. It is not looking at the complete inventory of Pakistan's nuclear weapons, which many people, friends like you, have described it as the fastest growing nuclear arsenal or something which is in the works still. So when you have that kind of an inventory on the Pakistani side, and there is the other side which is talking of massive retaliation in response to an odd tactical nuclear weapon, I think it has not been thought through, because they are not taking into account the balance of nuclear weapons of Pakistan, which hopefully not, but has the potential to go back and give the same kind of a dose to the other side. And this is the kind of a mutually assured destruction which must ensure that sanity prevails. So starting from the tactical nuclear weapons, if sanity prevails, and I hope that sanity will prevail, because after all on the other side also there are sane people. Therefore, the concept of peace must be reinforced. And if the concept of peace is reinforced, then these weapons serve the objectives for which they were designed. And like I said, the debate has been hijacked towards the lesser issues of command and control and falling into wrong hands, etc., which is a lesser issue. There are steps and there are ways and means of taking care of that, and we have tried to do that, so that it doesn't happen, these kind of fears that prevail. But the main purpose of the TNWs, the Nasser, etc., is to ensure that war will not break out.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to ask you a question about another weapon system on the other side of the spectrum. And this probably, the photograph has probably been placed on the wall under your successors time most recently. Your country recently tested the Shaheen-3, which is a much longer range, intermediate range ballistic missile. Can you tell us what the range of that missile is, and what is the logic for developing something with such a long range that would extend well beyond the mainland of India?
The announced range is the actual range, and that is 2750 kilometers. There is nothing less and there's nothing more beyond that. I recall some people calling it, saying that it might be 4,000 kilometers, etc., which is not correct. 2750 kilometers as of today is the range of Shaheen-3, and it has a logic. The logic is, as you say that it goes beyond the territory of India. It does not go beyond the territory of India, because what we are counting on also is not just the main Indian landmass, the peninsula, the eastern dimension, the southern dimension. There is, of late, there have been reports of the Nicobar and the Andaman Islands in the Bay of Bengal being developed as bases, potentially as strategic bases. And if those bases are not covered by Pakistan, and Shaheen-3 does that with 2750 kilometers, if those bases are not covered, then inadvertently Pakistan would be allowing, so to say, a second strike capability to India within its land borders. And Nicobar and Andaman Islands are very much part of India. Not main landmass, but they are islands. I'm sure you know where they are. But they are being developed as strategic bases, and therefore Pakistan cannot afford to let any land mass of India, whether it's an island or it's a mainland, to be out of its range. And therefore 2750 is a very well calculated range. And I don't particularly expect this to go beyond that, because it is now a comprehensive coverage of any particular land area that India might think of putting its weapons.
So you just said at the end, you don't expect your country to develop a capability with longer range in the future.
There's no need.
I think that the military logic of ranging all of your adversaries' potential strategic capabilities is probably understandable, certainly to the military people in the audience. But there's a political dimension with the Shaheen-3 that I think is troubling to the U.S. government and to many other governments of representatives here in the audience, and that now you'll have the ability to reach many other countries in the Middle East, for example, that Pakistan didn't have that capacity in the past. And that's troubling, because in international relations, from a defense perspective, you need to look at other countries in terms of the capabilities they have, not just their professed intentions. And so I wonder if maybe this is a situation where the military logic dominated and drove the decision to test and ultimately deploy the Shaheen-3, but that there are other political considerations that perhaps were not taken into account, or those trade-offs perhaps did not get adequate attention, and that maybe this is going to create more political difficulty for Pakistan in the future.
I don't know, frankly. Why should it create political difficulties for Pakistan in the future? Because the logic is very straightforward that I have explained. It is, the program itself is India specific. India has a certain landmass. We need that reach to cover India's landmass. And 2750 is barely sufficient to cover the areas of India. I don't know what are you really hinting at. Why should this particular range be troublesome for anybody else? Why is India's 5,000 kilometers not troublesome? Why is India's 10,000 and 12,000 kilometers program not troublesome? Why is India's space program with the ICBM potential capability not troublesome? Why is 2750 troublesome? I mean, India has developed Agni 5 for 5,000 kilometers, which purportedly supposed to be covering China. But then, in the same way, you change its direction, it covers so much else. And then they're not stopping at 5,000 kilometers. They're going up to 10,000 and 12,000 kilometers in ICBM, etc. They're all in the works. Why are those ranges not troubling the rest of the world? Why is 2750 kilometers bothering?
Well, why don't we open this discussion up to the audience? And I'd ask you to, we have people with microphones, I think, in each of the aisles. I will start, but please identify yourself and ask a brief question. And we'll start right here. There's this woman right here. And then we'll turn over here and we'll keep alternating around.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure listening to you. My name is Rabia Akhtar. I'm from Kansas State University. My question is, you've referred to international reports about Pakistan's nuclear weapons program being the fastest growing nuclear weapons program. And with respect to Pakistan's strategy, I wanted to ask you, is there an end in sight? Is there a particular number of nuclear weapons that Pakistan is looking at? Will Pakistan stop at some point? Or is it open-ended, dictated by the strategic dynamics of the region? Thank you.
Rabia, the program is not open-ended. It started with a concept of credible minimum deterrence, in which certain numbers were identified. And those numbers, of course, were achieved not too far away in time. And then we transited, like I said, to the concept of full spectrum deterrence, which was the response to plugging those gaps which were bothering or driving the cold start doctrine in identifying those gaps, etc. And therefore, a certain degree of dynamism came into the program. And to cover the different additions, if I may say, of that demanded of full spectrum deterrence, the numbers were modified. Now those numbers as of today, and if I can look ahead for at least 10 to 15 more years, I think they're going to be more or less okay, and we'll be comfortable with that, because beyond a certain number, you lose the logic. It's not an open-ended race. And I can assure you on the lighter side, the remaining two walls probably will remain vacant.
Can you say how many nuclear weapons your country possesses today? Ballpark.
Take a guess.
I've got a few guesses, but let me turn it over here.
Mark Fitzpatrick from IISS in London. Like Peter, I've had the pleasure of more intimate discussions with you, General Kidwai. You're familiar, I assume, with the statements by members of the Saudi royal family that if a deal with Iran legitimizes an enrichment program, that the Saudis would want the same capabilities. This raises the question of how they would acquire enrichment capabilities. No member of the nuclear suppliers group should be providing any such technology. But Pakistan is often mentioned as a potential source. There's a certain fairness to such a suggestion, given the presumption that the Saudis helped to fund Pakistan's program, and also given that Iran's enrichment program has its origins in Pakistan's centrifuges. Maybe it would be fair for the Saudis to have the same technology. The question is, can you envision any circumstances where the Saudis might acquire enrichment technology from Pakistan?
I think 90% of your question should be directed at the Saudis.
Well, maybe you could just answer the 10%.
I can answer for the 10% that you're insinuating about perhaps Pakistan being a potential source for the Saudis. I don't think Pakistan will ever be a potential source for any country. Never. We've got our own logic, we've got our own program, and Pakistan will not be proliferating in any way. So I can answer that. That is the 10% portion that I can answer for Pakistan.
Okay, thank you, General. Over here.
General, Admiral John Gower very recently retired from the UK Ministry of Defence. You made a very eloquent clarion call for supreme statesmanship in the region. I think no one here would have anything but very positive reaction to that. And you cited a very tight opportunity for that statesmanship. Similar statesmanship between the US and the Soviet Union was enabled by a growing culture of transparency and openness on the nuclear weapons, which led to a series of reduction and sustainment motives. And apart, if US colleagues will forgive me, the INF compliance hiccup recently that has sustained itself, So my question really is, what wiggle room, what maneuver space does your successor have to offer such transparency and openness going into the future? You've said that you have set the bar where it needs to be to deter. So where is that wiggle room, where is that maneuver space to give the transparency that will enable such statesmanship? Thank you.
I'm not sure whether I've got your question correctly. Transparency of what kind to and to whom?
Well, the answer to the question that you were asked on numbers is a good start.
Okay, I mean that is very straightforward. It's not a question of my successor, of myself, or any future head of the nuclear program. The Pakistan follows a policy of ambiguity, and ambiguity in a very well deliberated and well thought out manner. And if you're like Peter asked, or you're asking whether there will be transparency in giving out the kind of numbers, no, there will never be that kind of a transparency, because it will be against the policy of ambiguity that we are following. So I don't think any government of Pakistan, I mean DG SPD is a part of the government of Pakistan, and I don't think any government of Pakistan will want to abandon the policy of ambiguity and provide transparency. I don't foresee that. If you're talking in terms of letting the numbers be known.
Thank you, General. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Alexei Arbatov from Russian Academy of Sciences and Moscow Carnegie Center. Thank you, General, for your presentation. You mentioned that you call Pakistani nuclear weapons weapons of peace. And let me assure you that you are not alone. Every nuclear weapon state of the 9 states which exist now consider their own nuclear weapons weapons of peace. So if that is the case, should we worry about nuclear weapons, nuclear arms race, the threat of nuclear war and escalation, nuclear proliferation at all? Or Pakistan is more fair in its position than other nuclear weapon states?
I don't think I've got this question.
Well, I think the gentleman noted that as you refer to Pakistan's nuclear weapons as weapons of peace, so too do other nuclear weapons states refer to their arsenals that way. And yet, I think the reason for this conference, one of the reasons, is that there still is a great deal of concern about the existing nuclear weapons and the safety, security, and the prospects of nuclear weapons use among nuclear weapon states, and concerns about other countries that would seek to get nuclear weapons because they feel maybe similar threats. And there is a nuclear danger. It's known worldwide. Every country in the world is concerned about it. I think the question is, what is unique about Pakistan that we should rest assured and not have the concerns that we might have about other countries' stockpiles?
I mean, very frankly, I would not be, of course, like the rest of the participants of this conference and the people at large, we are all concerned very much about proliferation of nuclear weapons, and there must not be proliferation of nuclear weapons. But these 7 or 8 countries who have deliberately opted for nuclear weapons, these are responses to their respective regional threat, or in case of superpower, the global threat assessments. And Pakistani decision to have nuclear weapons is very much part of that threat assessment, going back to the 70s, like Peter said. And these weapons will continue to form the bedrock and the cornerstone of Pakistan's security policy, and provide security in a certain threat spectrum, in a certain threat environment that prevails in South Asia. And while hoping, of course, that there will not be a proliferation of nuclear weapons beyond these 7 or 8 countries who possess nuclear weapons. That's the best perhaps I can say.
Thank you. Over here.
Sir, Mohammad Umar from the National Defense University, Pakistan. You've clearly identified that there were gaps that India was trying to exploit. General B.K. Singh, former Indian Army chief, also said Pakistan's only deterred India's nuclear weapons but not conventional war. And Nasser and Shaheen were the short-range and long-range response to that. And you said Pakistan's only met 95% of its goals. Do we see Pakistan wanting to develop nuclear submarines as part of that full spectrum deterrence? Will we see that as part of the next 5%?
I won't say specifically nuclear submarines, but if you're talking of the possibility of Pakistan developing a second strike capability, which is a larger definition, submarine is just a platform. But beyond the submarine, you need a number of other things, communications with the weapon itself and so on and so forth. A second strike capability helps in stabilizing the first strike capability, in my judgment. And therefore, at some point in time, Pakistan should be looking at a second strike capability, particularly in a scenario where India is already well on its way. So we can't allow balances and imbalance to be disturbed. Balances must be maintained. So if there is, I might want to link it with the question that Rabia had asked, where there's an upper limit to what might be happening. If the threat or if the other side is driving a certain, I won't call it a race, a competition, or something which is being developed as a destabilizing element, then Pakistan has to come up with its minimum safeguards. And those minimum safeguards, in a situation today where there is a drive for a second strike capability on the other side, Pakistan cannot be oblivious to it. And therefore, without calling it a specific nuclear submarine or something, broadly speaking, a second strike capability, a limited second strike capability, a modest second strike capability for Pakistan, I think would be helpful.
So, General, if I could just continue. So in that regard, you would expect a sea leg of your nuclear deterrent at some point in the near future?
Perhaps yes, because second strike can again take the form of something which is based on land as well, if there is a survivability, but that is not assured. The assured second strike capability comes from being sea-based.
Okay, thank you. Over here.
Hi, I'm Salma Shaheen. I'm from King's College London. I'm a PhD student, so my questions are related to the nuclear command and control. We know we had a discussion earlier on it as well, but there are some issues that are still I'm looking forward. So can you just elaborate about the communication and transportation channels from top to bottom during the intense time of crisis regarding use or non-use of nuclear weapons in the region? And can you also elaborate, if possible, about the possible coordination between the three strategic force commands, Army, Navy, and Air Force, during the crisis time? What sort of the coordination there is in plans, if is it possible for two?
Look, I said that there is the SPD is the focal point for all kinds of coordination, which is working within the overall nuclear strategy and the military strategy, which has been worked out between the three services and the SPD or the NCA. So coordination is not an issue at all between the three strategic forces of Pakistan. SPD is the coordinating authority, and on behalf of the National Command Authority, if you have studied the division of responsibility or the delegation of responsibility within the NCA setup, you would know that operational control, which means a hell of a lot, lies with the NCA and the SPD. It is only day-to-day administrative control, some kind of a technical control, which has been delegated to the three services. So overall operational control, when operational coordination is very much part of operational control, rests with the SPD on behalf of the National Authority. So there is no issue at all. And about communications, etc., that you the first part of your question, and transportation, that again comes from within that is in the domain of the operational plans of the three services. The communications, which are elaborate communications based on the overall concept of the C4I2SR, and transportation, logistics, etc., all that is built into operational plans. And all that is developed, controlled, moderated on behalf of the National Command Authority by the SPD.
Thank you. This gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Tong Zhao from Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. I just have a quick follow-up question about the submarine matter. It might be relatively easy to put nuclear weapons on submarines, but it is very difficult to develop a very quiet and survivable submarine fleet. So I was wondering, before Pakistan can develop a really quiet and survivable submarine fleet, how could a sea-based nuclear deterrent capability add to the existing second strike capability of Pakistan? Thank you.
I would say it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress where different elements and different segments will come, are coming in stages. And there will be a time when there will be a platform as well. There will be a time when there will be a weapon. There will be a time when there will be communications part of it coming into place. And I can say with confidence that we're not too far away from it. So comprehensively speaking, I think this capability will come into play in the next few years.
I'd like to ask a follow-up. With the expansion of the nuclear weapons program in the manner that we've been discussing, can your country afford it? Pakistan faces acute budgetary problems. Its economy is in very poor shape. There's massive unemployment, very scarce electricity and energy resources, a lot of suffering in the Pakistan population. Is so much expense dedicated to this program justified in light of the misery and the suffering of a lot of the Pakistani people?
I think the question is very valid. Absolutely, the question is valid. But I would like to also clarify a kind of a misconception that goes into the calculations, and figures are floated around in a very irresponsible way. Pakistan's nuclear capability has a fraction of the overall defense capability, and as a percentage of the overall national budgets has been very much affordable. Notwithstanding the fantastic figures that are quoted in various by people in irresponsible writings, I don't know where do they get their figures from. But the amounts that have been spent in the last 4 decades plus on Pakistan nuclear capability, I assure you, I don't have the figures right now, but it's a fraction of what is spent on the conventional forces, which itself is within the range of about now today it is probably 3 or 3.5% of the GDP overall. So I think, philosophically speaking, yes, money spent on defense is always something that for poor countries it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me. But then when you're faced with a real life situation and a survival situation, then nations have to spend money on their defense wisely, sensibly. And I think the expenditure that has gone on to the nuclear capability, besides the numbers that I'm saying are fractions, I think it is well spent in the sense that it has overall, if it has the end result or the effects that have been created are that since 1971, war has not come to Pakistan, or conventional war has not come to Pakistan, aggression has not come to Pakistan. I think it's money well spent.
Thank you. We have about 7 minutes left, and I'll go back over here.
Thank you very much. My name is Anita Nilsson, and I would like to raise a question on the other side of the nuclear program of Pakistan, namely the peaceful side. And doing that in recognition of the bridging function of SPD earlier, and you yourself in particular, perhaps, when it comes to the peaceful program, energy generation. And the advances that has been made in the management of that with the regulatory authority, the educational staff, and the various technical measures that have been put in place. At the same time, we have a process now discussed in the conference here on the continuation of the Nuclear Security Summit and the priorities of that. So if you would share with us a little bit of your thinking on the status of the amendment of the Convention to the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material in Pakistan. That is an important legal instrument for moving ahead with the global aspects of perhaps the more simple but still important part of nuclear programs. Thank you.
Again,
could you just restate your question?
What is the specific question?
The specific question is the status for the moment of the process of ratifying the amendment to the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material in Pakistan?
Okay. Pakistan has been considering this for many years, if you are aware of this. And there are reasons for not signing these two. There are two instruments actually. And those are being, one I know is the last, when I left, I know there was still an interagency process which was on. And in that interagency process, there were certain things that needed to be ironed out. Per se, in principle, I think Pakistan does not have too much against those two protocols. And I see that in the next, I can't put a timeline on it, but I think in principle, Pakistan at some point should be signing those. There's nothing tremendously wrong with those instruments that Pakistan considers. It's only a matter of an interagency process that is still on.
Okay, good, thank you. Over here.
Thanks for your interesting speech. My name is Zahid Hussain. I am from Elliott School of International Affairs. I have a brief question about, as you said that Pakistan's whole defense program is to deter Indian capacity, and we know that India is investing heavily in the fourth dimension, which is a space. So I would like to know what Pakistan is doing to deter India in the space, because Indian space program is so extended and is going to be more expanded in coming years. So I would like to know what Pakistan is doing to balance that strategic stability.
In terms of the space program?
Yeah.
In terms of the space program?
Yeah, exactly, the space program.
Well, unfortunately, the space program of Pakistan has lagged behind. Not in any kind of a competition with India. There's no need for a competition. The Indian space program is not a threatening program, unlike the nuclear program. So there's no competition between India and Pakistan. And we wish India well wherever it wishes to go to the Mars or whatever. But Pakistani space program, in as much as the SPD is concerned, it must meet the essentials of our C4I2SR needs, which means basically communications and surveillance. Communication and surveillance. If Pakistani space program can meet the C4I2SR needs of the SPD or the nuclear program, I think SPD would be comfortable with it. Beyond that, if our scientists can take us to the moon, perhaps I'll be quite fine with
that. Yes, question, this gentleman.
Hi, I'm Ali Mustafa from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. Two quick questions. One is that my interaction with people in America, I've found out that the reason why Pakistan is not getting any waiver from the NSG is that the international community's perception about Pakistan has not changed drastically, especially because of the AQ Khan affair. Well, I see that Pakistan is investing heavily internally to try to dispel those concerns, but I don't see any movement outside Pakistan. Is there any diplomatic movement strategy done by Pakistan to counter those fears, especially towards the members of the NSG? And my second question is, you talked about that you have a figure in mind regarding the warheads. Considering the strategic modernizations happening in South Asia, like BMD and like India's submarine launched nuclear program, would that figure also increase with India's technological modernization?
Your second question first. To an extent, yes. Whenever you go into a new program, there are dynamics of that program and a certain X numbers would be required. So to that extent. But I would qualify it by saying that additional number would also be qualified by the needs for a credible minimum deterrence, minimum numbers, not open-ended. So that much for that. Your first question about our interaction with the NSG and efforts, diplomatic efforts being made, I think Pakistan is making every possible, every conceivable engagement that is possible to convince the international community, the powers that matter, that NSG exemption has not been a stabilizing factor for South Asia. NSG membership would be a further destabilizing step, and I've mentioned it in my opening remarks also, that friends who matter, who have the good of South Asia and strategic stability in mind, they must be helpful, not destabilize a delicate situation.
So diplomatic efforts are being made internationally and out in the outside capitals, and there is a dialogue going on with the NSG Troika. I am aware of that. But there's up to a point that Pakistan has its limitations, that you can make your case, but of course the decision to accept that case or not is not ours. So as far as making the case is concerned, I think Pakistan is making the best case that it can. Of course, this is not something that comes in newspapers every day, so you perhaps may not be aware of it. But on the diplomatic circles, at the diplomatic level, I think all efforts are being made to try and tell the world that this is going to be destabilizing. And there's this famous phrase that has been coined, criteria-based approach. You set a set of criteria, and India meets that criteria, Pakistan meets that criteria, the membership should be open to it.
I think we're coming close to our...
She's been wanting to ask a question for a long time.
Okay, so this young woman up here, please. Could you give her the microphone, please?
Thank you, General Kidwai. My name is Jeannie Nguyen with Voice of Vietnamese Americans. At the opening, you said that you talk about the statesman relationship between India and Pakistan, and you also said that the nuclear power that Pakistan is holding has great achievement for the fact that you think it's peaceful, it's aiming to peaceful resolution. So I understand that Pakistan is the only ally that China has. And given that China has a very well-developed space program, well-developed nuclear program, and well-developed submarine naval program on the way, where do you think the leadership of Pakistan, especially you, can advise the Pakistani leadership to use your ally with China to promote peace and security in Asia, given the connection between Pakistan, China, and North Korea? Thank you.
Thank you. An interesting nuclear alliance.
I think it's more in the domain of diplomacy than in, it's beyond the SPD really. But Pakistan and China, of course, have been old allies since the 60s. It's a source of strength for peace in the region, particularly in South Asia. It is not an alliance against any other country. And it is an alliance that has helped both countries achieve their respective objectives. It must go further. But your observation that China is the only ally of Pakistan, I think is not entirely accurate. Pakistan is the only ally of China. Again, I would disagree with that. I think China has plenty of allies. China is almost heading towards superpower status. It has many, many allies. Pakistan is not the, maybe we can beg to differ. But I mean, it's a compliment if you say that Pakistan is the only ally of China. I take it as a compliment. But in my perception, China has many friends, many, many friends. And they are playing their role at the global level in a most positive way, in a constructive way. And they are already finding their place under the sun in the global affairs. And I think they will find in due course also. But I can assure you that as far as their space capability is concerned, their nuclear capability, etc., is concerned, some other capability that you mentioned, on the peaceful side, nuclear energy particularly, space, yes, we are taking help. It's not a secret. They are providing us with nuclear reactors for energy. Energy is a big issue in Pakistan, energy deficiency. So I think it's mutual benefit that is going on between Pakistan and China, and I think it's a positive thing for the region, for South Asia particularly, and for Asia generally.
Thank you, General. I think this raises an interesting issue, and I think it's been a theme through a number of the questions. Countries are often judged not only on what they do and what they say, but on the friends they keep and the relations they have. And I think that's why there was so much mistrust about the Pakistan nuclear effort when A.Q. Khan did have relations with North Korea, Iraq, Libya, and Iran. And you've done a great deal to consolidate, to gain full control of the weapons program. And there's no evidence that I'm aware of other connections with other states subsequent. But I think that still troubling is the connection that the Pakistan state has with militant groups. And I'm not suggesting that Pakistan would ever aid militants with provide nuclear capabilities to militant groups, but a country to pursue mutually assured destruction presumably would not have a need of engaging with militant groups as proxies for other foreign policy objectives. I just asked this final question to you. Have you been able to prevail upon your colleagues in the military to cease the connections with other militant groups, because that has the prospect of triggering a war that your weapons are designed to prevent?
No, I don't have to pursue my friends in the military to do or not to do something. These are in the domain of national policies, and I would, in fact, I would question the basis of the question that you have asked, whether the question is accurate in the first place or not, because these are remnants of history that Pakistan has inherited because of superpower games in Asia. Pakistan got involved. If you want to go back in history, Pakistan got involved, and it was dragged into this situation because of two broadly geostrategic situations that were thrust on Pakistan. 1947, absence of self-determination for Kashmir, it has its consequences till today. You don't want to give self-determination to Kashmir, you encourage terrorism, you encourage militant groups. It's somebody else's business, because Pakistan is not denying self-determination to Kashmir, somebody else is. Consequences are being faced by the region, including Pakistan. Second date line, 1979. Pakistan did not invite the Soviet Union to come and disturb a tranquil Afghanistan, a tranquil Afghanistan, Pakistan. Pakistan did not ask the US and the West to come and counter and make Afghanistan the graveyard of the Soviet Union. Pakistan got dragged into it. Terrorism, militancy are consequences, in my judgment, of these two date lines, 1947, 1979. We are bearing the brunt of it. We are doing the best that we can with our limited resources. But to say that Pakistan, I should tell my colleagues not to get involved in military, it's very simplistic. It's much too simplistic. And if I may, very naive. It's divorced from the historical realities of why this particular phenomena is in place today in South Asia.
Well, thank you, General Kidwai. I think we've reached our allotted time, maybe have exceeded that briefly, but I do appreciate having this conversation. Again, strange for us to do this in such a public forum, but I want to thank you for providing so much information, so much insight. I think it's given people a lot more sort of grounds to contemplate how they regard the Pakistan nuclear program and the global nuclear danger. I don't know if you've satisfied everybody's concerns. I expect one could not do that. But hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation with myself and with others in the future. And hopefully you'll come back to future Carnegie Endowment conferences.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.